The darkest day of horror the world's ever known. It's the hauntingly memorable tagline to George Andrew Romero's arguably most controversial film in his original Dead trilogy, Day of the Dead. During its initial theatrical release in July of '85, it was hardly anyone's favorite one of the trilogy. Although Day had deeply devoted fans championing it from the start, most at the time believed it to be easily the least compelling entry in the trilogy. This year marks the 40th anniversary of Day of the Dead, and time has most certainly been kind to it. During the last 4 decades, George Romero's personal favorite of the trilogy has undergone a massive reappraisal by critics and the masses, and is now considered to be by most a horror classic that can and does stand proudly alongside its groundbreaking predecessors, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. A major reevaluation of appreciation is not the only thing Day has acquired over the decades. It has also garnered, among numerous things, 2 remakes, an unofficial prequel/sequel, and a television series. These spin-offs are the other Days of the Dead. In the spring of 2004, the horror film community and Romero fans were shocked to hear an announcement that a prequel/sequel of Day of the Dead was not only in the works, but was already filmed in April of that year in Los Angeles. How does one turn a sequel to a film into its own franchise, and then create a sequel to that? For better or worse, Day of the Dead 2 Contagium was an example of how it could or couldn't be done. This unofficial prequel/sequel was produced by the film's directors Anna Clavel and James Duddleson, who also produced the ill-fated unofficial sequel, Creepshow 3, a few years later. The story begins in 1968 at a military hospital where a Russian pilot named Rubinsky is being quarantined due to being infected with a devastating zombie virus of unknown origin. While surgery is being performed on Rubinsky, a zombie outbreak spreads throughout the hospital and chaos ensues. A team of soldiers arrive on the scene and demolish all of the living dead. During the chaos, a thermos containing the zombie virus ends up getting lost somewhere on the grounds outside of the hospital. Nearly 40 years later, 4 psychiatric patients from the former military hospital turned psychiatric hospital discover the thermos buried underneath the grounds on the premises. They keep the discovery of it amongst themselves. One of the 4 patients, in an unshakable urge of perilous curiosity, opens the thermos and stirs up a zombie epidemic within the hospital, which ends up expiring or zombifying nearly all those within. The rampaging undead break out the hospital walls and onto the streets and beyond, inducing a much more wider and deadlier Living Dead outbreak. Day of the Dead 2 Contagium was released direct-to-video on October 18, 2005, to universal scorn by both viewers and critics. It is far and away the lowest scored film in the entire Day of the Dead franchise. It also doesn't have enough review submissions by critics to receive any critical score on Rotten Tomatoes. I try my best to watch every movie with an open mind and heart. I try my best to find something good, something redeeming in every film, every piece of media. I first saw Day of the Dead 2 many years ago, and I thought it was absolutely appalling. Just about every element of the movie was horrid in all of the worst ways. I watched it again recently, and I'm still appalled by the ineffective direction, the often jarring and disconnected tonal shifts, the debilitating lack of scares and tension, as well as the debilitating lack of character development. This project also suffers from the introduction of way too many characters. along with multiple subplots that either end in a frustratingly anticlimactic manner or just left astoundingly unresolved. I do my best to not assume what's in one's mind, but from all appearances, this looks to be an utter and unapologetic cash grab that ultimately failed to accumulate much cash. Mostly lensed in Bulgaria, with additional shooting in LA, the first Day of the Dead remake was directed by Steve Miner of Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3 and Lake Placid fame, and was written by Final Destination creator Jeffrey Reddick. The 2008 movie takes place in a Colorado community where a mutated man-made virus infects most of the population and transforms them into flesh-eating cadavers who, like the living dead at the end of Day of the Dead 2, managed to last long enough to lumber on another day. The first cinematic redoing of Romero's classic brings back some of the characters from the original, including Sarah, played by Mina Suvari, Miguel, played by Nick Cannon, and Rhodes, played by Ving Rhames. Bub also appears as well, but for some odd reason, he's named Bud, and he's played by Stark Sands. Bud also is a strict vegetarian zombie. I believe that is indeed a cinematic first. My initial reaction to the first Day remake was not quite as harsh as the one I had for Day of the Dead 2. However, if Contagion is easily a contender for the worst zombie film ever made, this remake is definitely a contender for one of the worst. On a technical level, it's a competently, if unremarkably, directed film. The script is far from competent though. Similar to Day of the Dead 2, too many characters spoil the story. Suspense and tension is virtually non-existent. The 2008 retread is neither frightening nor disturbing. Most of the performances range from just okay to mediocre to ridiculously over the top. I will say, after my very recent second viewing of the film, Day 2008 is not as boring as I once believed it to be, so I guess that's something. The remake was released straight to video on April 2008 and was met with a terribly tepid response by most who have seen it, and it was not a financial success. After the 1-2 knockout failures of Day of the Dead 2 and the 2008 remake, one would readily believe that any more thoughts at expanding the Day of the Dead franchise would finally be put eternally to rest. Then in January 2018, the Day franchise resurrected from its grave once again with a second remake called Day of the Dead Bloodline. Texas Chainsaw 3D's producers, Krista Campbell and Lottie Grobman, were behind this version, which was helmed by the Corpse of Anna Fritz director Hector Hernandez Vicens. Just like the first remake, filming took place in Bulgaria. A medical student named Zoe is stalked by a patient of hers named Max. Max's obscene obsession with Zoe incites him to come dangerously close to essaying her. A morgue zombie inadvertently stops Max and sinks his rotten teeth into him. Zoe manages to flee from one danger and runs right into another, a city under siege by the newly reanimated dead. Jump ahead 5 years, Zoe is stationed at a bunker as a camp doctor, taking care of those refuged there while also attempting to create a cure for the living dead condition. During an urgent retrieval run, Zoe encounters a uniquely zombified Max, who somehow retained his intelligence. She escapes him, only for Max to stealthily stalk her all the way back to the bunker. Zoe encounters Max once again, and is saved by her companions. Shortly after Max's capture, Zoe discovers her undead stalker's blood is unique and could be used to produce a cure for the zombie virus. Max eventually breaks free of his confines, and a chain reaction of chaos ensues, in and out of the bunker. The film concludes with Zoe destroying Max for good and delivering the life-saving vaccine to those in need and curing them of the zombie virus. The direct-to-streaming and video release of Day of the Dead Bloodline fared even worse than the previous remake and garnered even worse feedback from movie watchers and critics. Day of the Dead Bloodline is unquestionably the closest of all the subsequent iterations to match the ultra-serious and bleak tone of the original Day. It is also in numerous ways the most insulting version of them all. Zoe, the stand-in for Sarah in this reinterpretation, makes unbelievably boneheaded and irresponsible decisions that causes some of the most dire consequences in this film. The dialogue is often odd and off-putting. The story is painfully flat, and save for the movie's opening act, it's a horror film stupefyingly devoid of dread or urgency. The most egregious creative sin of all is turning Bub, the endearing and emotive zombie from the original Day, into the sex predator, Max. Max is a clear stand-in for Bub, and the choice the filmmakers made to alter him in this drastic and ill-fitting manner from his original self is beyond baffling. I don't mind story or character changes from the original source material when they're done right. There's just barely anything done right in Day of the Dead Bloodline. The crawling, cinematic corpse that was the Day of the Dead franchise collapsed back into its burial plot to resume its eternal rest. At this present time, it remains completely inactive. For a brief juncture though, the television counterpart of the Day franchise's corpse did emerge from its resting spot and lumbered around on the Sci-Fi Channel during the fall of 2021. 10 episodes of Day of the Dead, the series, were produced in total by showrunners Jed Elinoff and Scott Thomas, co-producers of Wizards Beyond Waverly Place. I don't have a lot to say about the TV series, other than besides sharing the same title as Romero's masterpiece and a few character names, it's an entirely different story altogether about citizens in a small town trying to survive the start of a zombie apocalypse. Outside of the original film, Sci-Fi's Day of the Dead is undoubtedly the best or least offensive production of the whole franchise. I found some of the characters on the show to be interesting. There were even a few I cared about, and most of the time I was moderately entertained. This series is certainly nowhere near as good as Sci-Fi's other zombie show, the unjustly underrated and overlooked Z Nation, and I would only recommend it to only the most hardcore zombie fans. But I did feel a bit disappointed when a second season never materialized. This is my ranking of the Day of the Dead franchise from the absolute worst to the absolute best. Number 5, Day of the Dead 2, Contagium. Number 4, Day of the Dead, Bloodline. Number 3, Day of the Dead 2008. Number 2, Day of the Dead, the TV series. And worlds away, shining big and bright at number 1, is the greatest horror film the world's ever known, George A. Romero's original masterpiece, Day of the Dead.